Welcome, everybody, to another Alchemy Monday. I'm here with my co-host, Eros Up. Tell them where they can find you, Eros.
Hey, Headless. You can find me on Twitter, X, doesn't really matter, same thing, right? At Eros to Ethos, and you can find me on YouTube at Eros Up, which has been a bit stagnant lately, but I do plan to put some new stuff out soon. And yeah, follow if you're into metaphysics, astrology, Neoplatonism, um, archetypal hacking. Yeah.
Astrology, big time. You got to get that astrology going.
Yeah. I do love
But
astrology.
I know, and you're good at it.
I know.
But we've been talking about like all of this Socratic or Plotinus sort of theurgy all this weekend. And I just thought, why not connect the dots and talk about alchemy too? Because alchemy is a process in that theurgy as well. So I've got an essay that I got from ChatGPT that I'm going to be reading about that. And we're on chapter 3 of Paracelsus's book. So let's start with chapter 3 and then we'll get into it. Do you
Chapter 3 of the Philosopher's Tincture? Yeah. Let's do it. All right. Just doesn't let me
Before the show we were talking about digital bookmarks, using digital EFTs to make bookmarks and then selling those to people.
I still think I would rather have a pet rock, but okay. So this is the Philosopher's Tincture. I'm sorry, there's a train. You could probably hear the train, but
nope, you're good.
Okay. And this is by Paracelsus, but his full name is Philippus Theophrastus Paracelsus Bombast. And then we're on chapter 3. So this is titled Concerning the Process of the Ancients for the Tincture of the Philosophers and a More Compendious Method by Paracelsus. The old spagyrist putrefied the lily for a philosophical month, and afterwards distilled therefrom the moist spirits, until at length the dry spirits were elevated. They again imbued the caput mortem with moist spirits, and drew them off from it frequently by distillation, until the dry spirits were all elevated. Then they afterwards united the moisture that had been drawn off and the dry spirits by means of a pelican 3 or 4 times, until the whole lily remained dry at the bottom. Although early experience gave this process before fixation, none the less our ancestors often attained a perfect realization of their wish by this method. They would, however, have had a shorter way of arriving at the treasure of the Red Lion if they had learnt the agreement of the astronomy with alchemy, as I have demonstrated it in the Apocalypse of Hermes. But since every day, as Christ says, for the consolation of the faithful, has its own peculiar care, the labor for the spagyrus before my times has been great and heavy. But this, by the help of the Holy Spirit flowing into us, will, in this last age, be lightened and made clear by my theory and practice, for all those who constantly persevere in their work with patience. For I have tested the properties of nature, its essences and conditions, and I know its conjunction and resolution, which are the highest and greatest gift for a philosopher, and never understood by the sophists up to this time. When therefore the earliest age gave the first experience of the tincture, the Spagyrus made two things out of one simple. But when afterwards in the Middle Age this invention had died out, their successors by diligent scrutiny afterwards came upon the two names of this simple, and they named it with one word, namely lily, as being the subject of the tincture. At length the imitators of nature putrefied this matter at its proper period, just like the seed in the earth, since before this corruption nothing could be born from it, nor any arcanum break forth from it. Afterwards they drew off the moist spirits from the matter, until at length, by the violence of the fire, the dry were also equally sublimated, so that in this way, just as the rustic does at the proper time of year, they might come to maturity, as one after another is wont to ascend and to fall away. Lastly, as the spring comes summer, they incorporated those fruits and dry spirits, and brought the magistery of the tincture to such a point that it came to the harvest and laid itself out for ripening.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's the whole process we're talking about here. What they're talking about is putrefaction, and they're talking about drying, and they're talking about all of these sort of processes of this lily that makes the single magisterium tincture, right? So he's incorporating the salt, sulfur, and the mercury. The salt would be coming from the dried out ashes from the plant, right? The caput mortuum. And so the death's head is the black ashes. And then you calcinate those further and further until they're white ashes. It goes from the black stage to the albedo stage. And once you've got it in that white stage, it can then be poured into water, right, over and over again until all you have left is the salts from the ashes. So you created a situation where only the salts from that plant are left as a dry substance from that plant as well. So
And
the
that's the
process,
lily.
I'm not sure which lily, but you can do that with any plant pretty much. They've all got salts in their ashes.
I thought he was calling it like a name, Lily Li. Li.
Well, I think what he was talking about is now you have these two substances, but we always consider them to be one thing, right? We're considering these different parts of the plant still as one whole, and that's the difference between spagyricism and other forms of tinctures. Is it's the recombination of all of the parts that you can distill out of the plant, right? So as you've taken the salt out of the plant, as you've taken the alcohol out of the plant, and as you've taken the oil out of the plant and recombined them together, that's what a spagyric is. So it's a process for each step. But in the process, he's saying that there is no change from the original. That's all in the original, and that's why we call it the one thing, at least in my experience. So this is called the Serpent of Fire, an esoteric essay on the alchemical theurgy from the Neoplatonists to Paracelsus. In the twilight chambers of late antiquity, when the mysteries had withdrawn into silence of the philosophers, the Neoplatonists whispered of a secret art, Theurgia, the working of the divine within the fabric of matter. They taught that the cosmos was a ladder of light descending from the one through the mind into the soul of the world and finally into the trembling body of nature. Every stone, every herb, every metal shimmered with the memories of its forgotten origin. To the disciples of Iamblichus, ritual was not merely a symbol, it was the operation of the gods through sacred matter. Theurgy was a high alchemy of the soul, a furnace where the divine spark was coaxed back towards the celestial homeland. The initiate, by arranging talismans, fumigations, hymns, and patterned gestures, realigned the soul with its starry parentage. This, they taught, was not a metaphor, it was a craft, subtle, perilous, and luminous. Proclus, last great master of the Athenian school, spoke of sympathia, the secret bonds running like a golden thread throughout all of existence. These bonds, a stone could never answer to a planet, an herb to a god, a syllable to a cosmic wind. This was the first distillation of alchemical theurgy, the recognition that matter responds to spirit, and spirit to matter, through hidden harmonies older than creation. Thus, the Neoplatonists kindled the lamp, but it was the crucibles of Egyptian and Greek alchemists that the flame took shape. Zosimos of Panopolis, visionary of the furnaces, described metals as imprisoned spirits, yearning for purification. He wrote of the divine waters that dissolve the grossness of the soul and the fiery baptism that raises it again. His visions, alchemists sacrificed in the alembic, bodies dissolved into vapors, reborn as shining spirits, are the dreams of a man who saw no boundary between laboratory and liturgy. In him, alchemy became the drama of the soul, and the furnace became a temple. Arabic sages carried this seed across centuries. They taught that the world was woven of correspondences, sulfur as the fire of desire, mercury as the shimmer of the spirit, salt as the binding body. Each substance bore a heavenly signature impressed upon it like a divine seal. To manipulate these was to work with the very grammar of creation. Then in the Renaissance, when the stars shifted and the ancient voices murmured once more, a physician from the Alps stepped forth, Paracelsus, a storm bringer, scourge of scholars, lover of nature's hidden fire. In him, theurgic alchemy became incarnate again, no longer confined to temples nor to the cryptic papyri, but walking bodily into the healing arts. Paracelsus taught that nature is a book written by the finger of God. We kept talking about the fingers of God over and over again during the weekend. You know, you've got the Idean dactyls, right? That's what he mentioned. I don't think he said the word P.D. Newman on the earlier episode. He said, they were use these Idean or mountain spirits and work through them. Well, what he didn't include was that the Olympians were actually part of the Idean dactyl tradition as well. Hercules, being one of the Idean dactyls, was the patron of the Olympic Games. So as they're doing acts of sport, they're actually acting as fingers of the gods. So as they're, throwing the javelin and such, that's the expression of the god within them. Pretty interesting. So he declared that every substance contains a trinity: sulfur, soul; mercury, spirit; and salt, body. This was not chemistry, but cosmology expressed through matter. By the separating, purifying, and reunifying of these principles, the alchemist became a priest of nature, reenacting on the earthly plane the eternal cycles of the heavens. Where the Neoplatonists invoked gods, Paracelsus invoked nature herself, radiant with the same divine intelligence, where they sought ascent through symbols. He sought transmutation through fire, yet the current is one, the serpent of fire, winding from heaven to earth, from theurgy to alchemy, from ritual to medicine. For in the end, alchemical theurgy is the art of remembering, to awaken the divine in matter, to awaken the divine in ourselves, and to know that both are the same flame, single infinite light mirrored in the furnace of creation.
It's awesome. I guess you asked me last time if I thought Apollo had anything to do with alchemy, and I do, because he is the one that I think blesses matter with spirit. But also it makes me think too, there's so many alchemical processes that are mentioned there, and I'm like, is dialectic kind of a form of alchemy too? Because you're breaking down nous into its most base parts, and then just thinking about the Hercules allegory, it's like definitely a kind of spiritual alchemy of like aligning to I don't know. I would say your North and South Pole, so maybe I'm not sure, but that hero's journey, I just wonder, are there 12 different steps to alchemize something? I don't
Well,
know, like 12 labors?
if we're going to look at the well, the 12 keeps popping up again in literature over and over and over again, right? So that's like the holy number of completion, the 12 steps. And it's 3 times 4, right? So you've got the 3 parts, the salt, sulfur, and mercury, multiplied by fire, earth, water, and air, gives you the 12. And we see this in the, the astrological as well as the, the physical. So everything would have that 12 parts as it makes up the whole, So as you're separating out the salt, sulfur, and mercury from your concoctions, there are still other parts that you're taking that salt, sulfur, and mercury from. Each plant has a fiery part. Each plant has a watery part. Each plant has an earthy part, and each plant has an airy part, right? It's just the nature of the plant itself. And when you understand that you're pulling these other essences from these other examples, you kind of get the idea that maybe these are the fundamental primary parts, as opposed to what you see with your eyes as the plant is, is right in front of you. So, the roots, definitely the earthy part of a plant, right? The the leaves. This is where you're producing the the oxygen and the ATP. Well, the ATP is how they're going to get the energy, right? So the leaves pointing up towards the sun absorb the fire. So that would probably be a fiery part. And there's the gas exchange in those leaves themselves, which create the ATP, which, the whole process is alchemical in nature. And so, the theurgy aspect is right there, because each one of these gods and goddesses all have a elemental type nature that plays into these different transformations or metamorphoses. So I'm pulling up here the Orphic Hymn to Apollo. And I want to see if I can read that, because you'll see so many of these connections. I think they made a bunch of these Orphic Hymns to Apollo, but there we go. Number 33, go figure. So this is Orphic Hymn 33.
That's funny.
It is. I'll get into a little bit of what I was talking about on spaces yesterday. I think that has a lot to do with it too. Blessed Paean, come propitious to my prayers' illustrious power, whom Memphian tribes revere, slayer of Titus and the god of health. Lycaonian Phoebus, fruitful source of wealth. Spermatic golden lyred, the field from thee receives its constant rich fertility. Titanic, Grunian, Smithian, I sing to thee, Python destroying, hallowed Delphin king. Rural, light bearer, and the muse's head, noble and lovely, armed with arrows dread, far darting Bacchan, twofold and divine, power far diffused, and course oblique is thine. O Delian king, whose light-producing eye views all within and all beneath the sky. Light-producing eye. The Greeks called him the elder Horus. So they're just saying it right there. This is Horus. This is the eye of Horus. Whose locks are gold, whose oracles are sure, whose omens good revealest and precepts pure. Hear me entreating for the humankind. Hear and be present with malignant mind? Benignant. I gotta look that one up. For thou surveyest this boundless ether all, and every part of this terrestrial ball. Abundant and blessed thy piercing sight extends, beneath the gloomy silent night, beyond the darkness, starry-eyed profound, the stable roots deep fixed by thee are bound. Also a very alchemical reference right there. So you're always talking about the roots of one thing and the, elemental natures. What did they call it in Neoplatonism, where they're talking about the hypostasis, right? So they've got the hypostasis, which is like the root, and that goes straight into what they're talking about in alchemy as well, because every plant would have those 3 hypostases, which would be the salt, sulfur, and the mercury. Let me see. The world's wide bounds all flourishing are thine, thyself all the source and end divine. 'Tis thine all nature's music to inspire with various sounding harmonizing lyre. Now the last string thou touchst sweet to chord, divinely warbling now the highest chord. I mean, they're right there on that whole frequency thing as well. The immortal golden lyre, now touched by thee, responsive yields a Dorian melody. All nature's tribes to thee their difference owe, and changing seasons from thy music flow. Hence mixed by thee in equal parts advance, summer, winter in alternate dance. This claims the highest, that the lowest string the Dorian measure tuned to the lovely spring. Hence by mankind pan-royal two-horn named, emitting whistling winds through Syrinx feigned, since to thee thy care the figured seals consigned, which stamps the world with forms of every kind. Hear me, blessed power, and in these rites rejoice, and save thy mystics with a suppliant voice. What'd you think of that
Jeez.
one?
I mean, pretty rich in symbology. I mean, all sorts of forms mentioned, and what did they say at the end? Like stamping.
Stamping the world with kind. It was stamps the world with forms of every kind.
Yeah, I think that says it all, right? It's like that creative energy.
Constantly striving. I think there's a reason why he's also the god of self-awareness, right? So when you see them talking about know thyself at the oracle at Delphi, it's because Apollo is the god of knowing yourself, which is interesting because he's the final boss in the book of Revelations, right? He's in the pit, and the final boss of Christianity is self-awareness.
I don't actually, I don't know any like much about Revelations.
It's interesting because they say Apollyon, which is the way that, you know, they spell out the name Apollo, is coming up from the pit in the end times. He's the one who retakes the world or something like that. And I've seen a bunch of Christian mythology about, yeah, at the bottom of everything is this satanic Apollo, and Apollo is separate from Satan, and he's worse. And well, I listen to a lot of Christian podcasts, so they go into a bunch of weird exegesis on this stuff.
Oh gosh,
And,
hopefully they never look at a picture of Phanes.
Well, yeah, if they knew about that, then they'd be off that Apollo stuff. But, you know, that's what it says in the Bible. So Phanes would be, you know, the 12 signs of the zodiac. He's within the Orphic egg, and then he springs forth, and then you have all life and all light in the universe sort of springing forth with him. And we see these egg-shaped UFOs that are apparently popping up now, which is bizarre. And the guy who's talking about, you know, recovering one of these egg-shaped UFOs is talking about how a goddess was speaking through his mind from this egg. And he found that weird and started crying. I forget his name, but there's an interesting video. If you look up egg UFO video, you'll see what I'm talking about. Like he's on a different level. This is not what you think it is. This isn't aliens. This is stuff that's been here for a long, long time that we've just lost track of completely. And as they're rediscovering it, you know, I could just point to the hieroglyphs. You know, it's like, this is what you're seeing. This is Phanes right here. This is what you're seeing. This is the Orphic egg. You're seeing the snake and the power of the energy of all of this stuff. And you guys actually just put this in a box a long time ago and you forgot about it. And so now you're rediscovering it today. So congratulations. You know, the world is far more mystical than we give it credit for. And one of the ways of approaching that is by understanding these constituent parts. You know, maybe we're made up of the same stuff that our thoughts are made of. And by understanding that and getting in harmony with the rest of nature, you can actually seed the nous or the mind of God, right? Because that's what a lot of these rituals were talking about. That's what the point of Theurgy was, is to make yourself in tune with nature and the mind of God. And you can do that using alchemy as well as going through these rituals through, you know, the Eleusinian type mystery schools. But it's all part of the same thing. It's just not allowed to be talked about for almost 2,000 years. So now that we're rediscovering it, it's really exciting to me. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I mean, Ian Blickus believed that it was necessary to have that intermediary, but I think, yeah, we're always seeding the noose. I think that's a lot of that maybe predictive programming, like they're purposely making people kind of seed a certain future.
Which would make sense if you wanted to keep it away from the public so that they didn't know they were being seeded with certain narratives coming in the future. And if you're a psychopathic person who knows you can basically plan out a society's creation or destruction using, preformed messages that would shape the narrative because they've forgotten about the noose. So it becomes easier.
Mm-hmm.
My big thing recently is thinking about what about if there's a god of the unknown, right? All of the gods that, are listed are gods of the known, right? So Apollo would be a list of all of these things that are known. But what if there was a god with only unknown properties, right? He exists outside of the reach of anybody's perception. And basically it's the thing that can't really exist simultaneously with everything that is known in the universe. So it's almost like unknown becomes sort of the thing behind everything, right? So it's the thing holding it up, because if it can't exist in this world and only exists after something has perceived it, or before something has perceived it, it would almost have more power, more connection to the parts in your life that maybe you don't fully understand, right? On a psychological level. So I've been experimenting with the idea of this God of the unknown for a while. And it seems like developing a personal relationship with the unknown, you can actually start to understand and perceive unknown things more easily, right? You're bringing yourself in alignment with the things other people don't understand.
I mean, wouldn't you just do that through symbology?
There is that, but even through symbology, you're almost admitting that somebody else knows it better than you do. Like you're saying, this is the stuff that nobody's looking at right now. And then it sort of starts to manifest in your reality in different ways, right? This is sort of where society is going, the future events, like all of this stuff is tied to the unknown. There's no certainty about it. And within that wiggle room, you can almost see that there would be a God of that, figuring which parts of himself to dole out as knowledge, right? So that's sort of once the known becomes, or once the unknown becomes known, it stops being part of the God of the unknown.
I don't know. Then it just becomes a argument on determinism, which I'm still not fully made up on, because it is possible that everything just already exists in these perfect forms and they're just kind of cascading out and unfolding as a pattern that may look chaotic, but it's really not. I don't know. And there's also like I don't think that it's that uncommon either that we can be introduced to new archetypes. So I don't know.
You have to kind of you got to kind of break apart the old archetypes that seem very certain for you to come up with new ones. It's almost like you're using the same clay to create more figures, right? So you kind of developed a relationship to those old archetypes, and they were much bigger than life. And then you had something happen in your own life that sort of cracked and broke that image, and then left you with two more images, right? What happened then, and then what happened now? And these two different archetypes sort of break apart even further when you examine the things that brought, the events that brought those into your life. And behind all of it is sort of like an unknown. It's a factor that's, bringing things into your life that maybe you don't fully understand. It's like the difference between the Edenic state and the fallen state. So the Edenic would be completely naive, while at the same time being completely protected, right? There would be nothing that could harm you in that nascent state, kind of like in the womb, right? And then from the womb onwards, it's nothing but new unknown factors breaking apart the images that you thought you had fully formed in the Edenic, Orphic egg.
I don't know why that makes me think of Neptune. Does it make you think of Neptune at all? Like, gosh, you said that state of being completely naive but protected definitely makes me think of Neptune. Like, I don't know, Neptune is so hard to describe, but uh, the
To
world's
me,
soul.
Neptune's more like a solvent, right? Like you're adding a bunch of water into it, and then it just sort of starts dissolving all the other parts to it.
It is. It dissolves, but it is also the world's soul, and it's also unconditional love. And so it's kind of weird how that all works together. It's the last phase kind of um like
Last at first, because the dissolving of the materials that comes first before you can separate anything. The solve has to come before the coagula. And it makes sense with all of the water magic and all of the new studies going on with water and all these different properties that scientists ignored for so many years. Because why do we have to study water? We already know everything about water. We don't need to do that. And then you find out, well, actually, there's a lot of interesting electromagnetic potential in the water that nobody was looking at.
a lot of
All of these other ways.
uncertainty.
Exactly.
I think though
Uh,
that with that uncertainty though, like I think that you can get in touch with that certainty through a symbol. I think that's the only way.
Well, that's certainly a part of what I was trying to do with the slides, right? So as the slides freeze, you get symbols that are associated with the thing. So I figured that would be a good one. Major factor when it comes to theurgy is divination, right? Divination is all over theurgy, right? That's part of how you get in touch with the spirits. And they were talking about that too today on the theurgy episode, where he was talking about casting these coconut coins. And if it's, side up or side down, you have to go along with it so that you're proving yourself to those spirits that you would be a reliable messenger or a reliable host. And so I think the same applies to a lot of theurgy, where you're doing geomancy, you're doing at the Oracle at Delphi, they had a bag full of beans, right? I think it was just to offend the Pythagoreans that they had beans in a bag. But some of them would be painted white and some would be painted black. And as you're waiting in line for your oracle, you would ask the person who's holding the bag of beans a question, reach in, pull out a bean, white is yes, black is no. And that's your divination right there.
Or
So,
pendulums. Have you ever I I have a pendulum that works too. It's like that uh crystal on a string and you just ask it questions.
right. And if you're doing alchemy, you should have a divination process, because this is how you're interacting with the nature that you're trying to manipulate. And it's
Why
not
would
like the nature
you
saying no.
why would you want to do divination with alchemy?
Well, it's sort of it aligns again, like the theurgist concept. It would align you with the spirits you're trying to use. So you're talking about the spirits of salt, sulfur, and mercury. You're going to ask, when should I do this? Should I go along with this chart? Should I use this thing? You're asking, and you're incorporating the spirits into part of the process. So through your meditations as well, you're going to be asking for visions, and you're going to be wanting to see the different results, or how you can change things in a way that is more in tune with nature. Again, the entirety of alchemy is not published. most of the stuff that they're talking about when it comes to the alchemy of the metals is symbolic in nature. So you have to access these spiritual realms so that you can decode this stuff and know how to use it in your own practice to achieve things like the Philosopher's Stone. That's one of the protections that they put on alchemy. Is like, we can't tell you everything. You're going to have to figure this out for yourself. And the more aligned with the spirits you are, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to decode this. But until you've reached that point, you're profane, and we can't talk to you about it. So the divination is a really big piece that I think a lot of people overlook. It's not just a laboratory thing. There has to be more spirit involved.
I think the best that you could get in touch with is your own daemon. But
very big part of the process as well. As you're doing your meditation, looking at your birth chart and understanding what all of these forces and how they've manifested in you, and having a discussion with them and seeing if you can align them, seeing if you can repurpose the maybe negative energies to a much more positive thing. These are all part of the theurgic process.
Very Hercules coded.
Yes, absolutely. The 12 labors again. It's all about how we're moving through that circle, through that wheel, and all those different spokes. But this has been a great episode. Thank you for joining me again. Next week, I'll definitely have that tubing. They had to send it back, which is weird because it's just tubing. I think my other purchases have thrown them off. I got the vacuum pump, and now they're telling me that they can't give me the tubing. So
they're sketched out by you. They're going to have you come sign it again.
Who isn't? That's the problem. Everybody is. So if they could just show up once in a while, that would be very helpful. So Amazon, if you're listening, which I know you are, let's make this happen.
They got to put you on a proper watch list, and then you'll get it.
I need a babysitter or something, some sort of a handler. But thank you guys for showing up, and we'll see you again next time.